Hi, I'm Steve Helstrip, otherwise known as the Thrillseekers. You probably know me for various productions over the past 10 years or so. I'm also a DJ. I've released several compilations under my Night Music brand, and I have a radio show also under the Night Music brand, and a podcast which goes out every month. I've been producing here from my studio here in the UK, and it's been a whole load of fun so far. Well, 2010 is going to be a pretty busy year for me. I have 3 new tracks already which are finished, which are going to be released throughout the year. The first of which will be Savannah. I'm also working on a collaboration with Mike at the moment, which is looking like it's going to be a really big track for the summer, and various other collaborations. I'm also working on a couple of remixes which you'll be hearing about soon. We also have quite a few live shows coming up, which is a new project for me called the Thrillseekers Live Extreme. And what that is me going out with various bits of equipment, including keyboards, drum machine. We have really cool visuals to accompany the show, and basically it's 10 of my biggest tracks all remixed and brought up to date for 2010. I've kind of pumped up the energy on all the tracks, and it's kind of a big peak time show. So I played my first gig over in San Francisco a few weeks ago, and I'm going to be playing my first UK date at the Ministry of Sound in April, and also I'm going to be in Kuala Lumpur also doing the same show. I would say my favourite artists probably lie outside of trance music, simply because when I've been producing trance music all day, then the last thing I want to do in my spare time is listen to more trance music. So in my spare time I love to listen to bands like The Verve. I also love Keen as well. If I had to choose one artist from the trance scene who I love, then I would probably choose Chicane. I've remixed a couple of, well, in fact 3 tracks of Chicane's over the years, so it's been a great privilege. What are my all-time favourite trance tunes? Well, I would say Chicane Offshore has to rank as one of my favourite of all time. BT has also been hugely influential in my career, so the whole album Emo is probably my favourite work that he's done. Let me think. Future Sound of London's Papua New Guinea, also a huge track, especially the Satoshi Tony remix. What else has been really big? Ferry's mix of Barbara's Adagio for strings, also a huge tune which I still love. In 5 years from now, goodness knows what I'll be doing. I'd love to be still producing music, of course. How that's going to evolve and whether that will still be dance music remains to be seen, but we'll see what happens. Something that really shocked me was when I was touring Australia a few years ago, and I had an email from a guy who was coming to one of my shows, and he said, would it be okay if he brought some vinyl for me to sign them, because he was a collector? And I said sure, and I met the guy at the gig, and he literally had every single piece of vinyl that I'd ever produced, every remix, every piece of vinyl from Thrillseekers, Rapid Eye and Sigma. And so I think there were like 40 or 45 pieces of vinyl, which I happily signed. What made it even more interesting was that a lot of the vinyl you couldn't actually purchase in Australia and had to have shipped from the UK or Europe. So yeah, I was really touched by that, so I will never forget that moment. What is an average day in my life? Well, most days I kind of wake up around 7 o'clock. I have 3 children, so I don't need an alarm clock. We have breakfast, I take the kids to school, and then around about 10 o'clock I'll head into the studio, which is where I am now. And most days I'll spend half the day producing music, and the other half going through the usual admin kind of things that need to be done as well. And of course I produce a radio show as well, and a DJ, so I have a lot of music to listen to. On an evening, well, pretty much spent in here also with Jay, who is my assistant who works here, doing everything else that I don't do, so yeah, we kind of spend a lot of time in here. What would my dream collaboration sound like? Well, I think I'd have to pull together all my favourite producers and maybe even singers. Let me think. Vangelis is somebody who I would love to make a track with. He kind of pioneered a lot of electronic music but also pulls in orchestral and classical influence. So I've listened to so much of his music and spent many hours listening to how he kind of does his thing. Let me pull in Chicane for his kind of Balearic sound and bringing some of that influence. BT for his technical abilities, and myself playing some parts in there. So yeah, that's kind of where I would see my dream collaboration. One thing that I would like to be known for in the EDM fraternity. For me, so many producers seem to be now making so many records and putting quantity before quality. That's something that I'm strictly against, have always been against. So I would like to be remembered for someone who basically put out good quality music time and time again, and not putting out records just to have a record out there. The 5 things I couldn't be without, I'm going to keep this related to music production by the way, would be first of all my Mac, which I produce my music on, and the main software I use is Cubase. I've been using that for about 20 years now, so I kind of know it inside out. One of the best, my favourite keyboards still is the Nord Lead 2, and I've used that on pretty much every track I've ever made. It produces a really warm, rich sound, which I love. I also know a lot of producers love the keyboard also. The Lexicon PCM80 Reverb is a unit which also I've used on all my tracks since I started producing trance music, and it kind of gives the sound a kind of really silky, expensive sound, which is actually missing quite a lot from a lot of trance productions because it's quite an expensive bit of kit, but it's something I just couldn't do without. Also, I would choose Universal Audio's plugins. Again, they allow me to shape the sounds into pretty much anything I need. And one last thing, then I would probably go with Sound Toys plugins, also very high quality plugins, and along with everything else I've mentioned, allow me to create the sound that is the Thrillseekers. Which leads nicely onto how I would describe my sound. I produce trance music on the whole, but I like to be very detailed with my production. Every time you hear a track of mine, you probably always hear something new that you haven't heard before. I like to be very clean and clinical with my sound. All my tracks have a lot of depth and emotion, and I also look to work with vocals an awful lot as well. So yeah, that's pretty much how I would describe it. My studio setup right now is obviously based around Cubase on the Mac, as I mentioned earlier, and I have a whole bunch of synths and external equipment like reverbs and compressors, but to be honest, I'm using those less and less and choosing to mix all my tracks in Cubase. Apart from the reverb, which I mentioned earlier, which I haven't yet come across a good sounding reverb or that sounds as good as my Lexicon. One synth which I do still use a lot of is the Virus TI and Yamaha CS6X, but apart from that I've been able to replace a lot of my synths with software. So yeah, that kind of wraps that one up. Okay, thank you for watching. If you are further interested in the equipment and the production of trance music, then I do have a YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Thrilltube, and I've made a whole bunch of production tutorials, and in those you can see more about the equipment that I use and take a look around the studio. Later in the year we've got a whole bunch of new tracks coming out, so you can always find out what's going on by visiting the website. That's thrillseekers.co.uk. Okay, bye.